Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Sidharth Bhatia. The Modi government's ambitious plans to develop the Great Nicobar Island has outraged both locals and environmental activists. The project, which has been called a holistic development, includes an international container transshipment terminal, an airport, a township, and a power plant, and perhaps much more. The whole project is estimated at rupees 70,000 crores and perhaps more. The island, part of the Andaman and Nicobar group of islands, is not only pristine and untouched but a UNESCO recognized biosphere. Those opposing the massive infrastructure project say it will destroy the habitats of several flora and fauna and also boost the population to untenable levels. Besides, I think bringing in people from the mainland to settle down in the island. Recently, the Association of Indian Primatologists warned that the project would endanger the Nicobar long-tailed macaque and gradually wreck its entire system. This is a quote from what the association has said. Pankaj Sekhsaria is among the most vocal opponents of the project. He has been associated with the islands for a long time. He has written about and campaigned for Great Nicobar for over 3 decades and recently edited a book, The Great Nicobar Betrayal, a collection of essays which present a horrific picture of the sheer destruction of the sensitive ecology of the island. Pankaj joins me today to join about why this project should not go ahead and what will be the consequences if it does. Pankaj Sekhsaria, welcome to the Wire Talks.
Good evening, and Siddharth, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, how and when did you get involved with the Great Nicobar Islands?
So I've been, like you mentioned, I've been working in and on these islands for a very long time, and we've been following developments of various kinds. In the Great Nicobar Island project in particular, we began to hear about it in late 2020, early 2021. First, when some changes were made to the national parks, the boundaries of the national parks that are located in this island. And then more specifically in March of 2021, when a Gurgaon-based consultancy company called AECOM India Private Limited, on the bidding of Niti Aayog, published this report that you mentioned, a report for the holistic development of a Great Nicobar Island. And like you mentioned, this 70,000 plus crore project, roughly $10 billion, which has this massive infrastructure suggestion for this very pristine, largely uninhabited island of 910 square kilometers in the extreme south of the Andaman and Nicobar island chain. So when we looked at the document and we saw the details, and then it was really concerning because of the scale of what was proposed, of the proposed investment, and the impact that we feared it would have on, like you mentioned, the local flora and fauna, but also more importantly, perhaps certainly equally importantly, are the indigenous communities there. So this massive proposal that was suddenly there in the public domain, and me and a lot of others who've been following these islands for a long time looked at that, and we were quite kind of shocked and worried about what that was proposing, the scale of what was being proposed, and what the implications of that would be.
Tell us about the Andaman and Nicobar chain and why they are significant in themselves and to India.
Well, for one, it's a very unique ecosystem. I mean, this is this Arakan Yoma mountain range that runs in this arc from Myanmar in the north down into Sumatra in the south. It's a long chain. It's vertical. It's almost a chain of islands, 600 plus big and small islands, that of course are very far away from mainland India. And it's history. It's a part of history now that they belong to India. They are biogeographically very unique. They have a lot of elements from the Southeast Asian realm. There are some elements from the South Asian kind of thing. So you have a very unique ecosystem. Island systems, we know because of their separation from other land masses, developed ecological systems, species, you mentioned that in your introduction, that are unique, that are what are known as endemic, that are not found anywhere else on any other landmass. And in the case of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, of course, they are an extremely beautiful and a precious landscape, pristine, becoming popular for tourism. But like I mentioned just a short while ago, these islands are also home to indigenous communities who've been here for thousands and thousands of years. Long before independent India came into being, long before the British came, we're talking of a history of 200 years. These people have been here for thousands of years. We know very little about them, and they're spread across this island chain, right from the Andamans down in, which are in the northern part, and the Nicobars in the southern part. And most of these communities are small numbers and deeply threatened and vulnerable. And Great Nicobar in particular is the home to two of these communities. One which is actually what is known as a particularly vulnerable tribal group, a PVTG, a community known as the Shompen, which is a very shy, remote forest-dwelling community. And their numbers might be less than 300 people today. So that makes it even more important for the ecology of the place, for the uniqueness, for the singularity, and of course the fact that these communities have been living there. They have constitutional rights, they have legal rights on that land. So for all these reasons and more, this island chain is extremely important for what is there, the uniqueness and the singularity of so much that is only found in this particular place.
But is it your case that these communities by themselves should be left alone forevermore?
Why not? If they choose to be as they are, if they have guaranteed rights and they have the right to that land and that forest, and they've been doing pretty all right for the last thousands of years, then there does not seem to be, to me, any particular reason to intervene. Also, to keep in mind that the history of interaction with these communities, what are largely isolated communities in India, but also largely over the world, globally, the outcomes of these interactions have not been very favorable to these communities. I mean, it is a different, it's a difficult moment in, say, the history of the world, where yes, we are getting integrated. There are very few lands that remain as isolated. The spread is increasing, but where we can, I think there's a good reason why, for their rights, for their culture, for the fact they have been. I think we should let that be if it is possible. And I think in cases like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which have remained rather isolated, and they continue to be as they are and have not been wiped out as cultures and thriving communities, I think that's good enough reason for them to be like for any other culture, because the experience suggests that they do very badly. And even within the Andaman Islands, the Great Andamanese community in the Andaman part, a community known as the Onge, they've all suffered very badly in the last 200 years after interaction with the outside world.
Yeah,
So
I
yes,
was
I would
coming to
suggest,
that.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, so looking at all of that, I would argue that yes, where we have a chance, we should let these people be, because we have no guarantee that we will let them be, that they even survive as viable, thriving communities if the outside world starts to intervene.
So yeah, I was coming to that. Andaman Islands saw development of various kinds in the pre-British times and post-British. Certainly, there's a naval base there, if I'm not mistaken. Tourism is there. There are hotels, etc. How has this impacted on the flora and fauna and the local communities? Because that will give us some idea of what we can imagine can happen if the Great Nicobar Islands are developed. Developed, I use in quotes here, but yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, if you look at the history, like I mentioned, just the sheer numbers of people, even 50, 60 years ago, of the indigenous communities as against the outsider, right from British times, there were people who were brought there during the colonial period. People came after that as economic migrants. There has been an entire process in the 50s and 60s to settle what were East Pakistani refugees in these islands. And all of this has come on the lands of the indigenous people. So it's a complex history to be able to kind of quickly narrate. But if you look at, say, the Great Andamanese community, which is one of the Andaman tribal communities, and we have to make a difference between Andaman and the Nicobar, and also that Great Nicobar is just one island in the Nicobar group. So there are multiple underlying currents even within this whole thing. One can't talk of the Andaman and Nicobar Island as one entity. The Nicobar, the Great Andamanese community, from roughly 5,000 people in the middle of the 19th century, today they are a community down to just 50 people. So this is a combination of what the British did and what happened post-independence. Similarly, the Onge tribal community has come down in very large numbers. They have been influenced very deeply by the outside world and the cultures. And one is not saying that that should not be the case, but if they don't survive as a viable community, if they change so drastically that they lose what they were, then it's not really a very much benefit to what we are looking at. Then these are also forests. Large parts of these forests, large parts of the islands are very thickly forested. We have a very rich coastline, very rich marine areas. A substantial part of which is still pristine. We have species of animals and birds and butterflies and plants that are unique to that place. And the more there is intervention from the outside, we are going to see a problem of their loss, their destruction. And other things with the population increasing, tourism coming in, fresh water is a big problem there, waste disposal is becoming a problem. So what typically happens when there is an exponential growth in economic activity of a certain kind, those things we are beginning to see in those islands. And I'll just kind of also jump to the last point you made, is that what we have seen in the islands is in the last 50, 60, 70 years is only a fraction of what is now proposed in one island in Great Nicobar. So just to give you one point of reference there, and you referred to this in the beginning, as part of this proposal for one island in the entire chain, the proposal says that they will bring in 3.5 lakh people into this one island of Great Nicobar, where the population today is 5,000 or 5,000 to 8,000 people, of which less than 1,000 people are the indigenous people. Now, 3.5 lakh people in one island, the total population of the entire Andaman and Nicobar Islands today is about 5 lakh people. So you can imagine the scale of what is going to come to this one particular island and the impact that would have. And we can go into the details of what that would be. But
Yeah.
that just for reference, that number is a very important number.
So actually, that segues well into what my next question was. What exactly is the plan for Nicobar? Give us some the details that have been proposed.
So this is a massive kind of 4-component project. It is on this island of 900 odd square kilometers, of which about 20% is going to be allocated for this set of projects. About 160 square kilometers of land, pristine forest, home of the tribal people, is going to be taken away. There is the centerpiece is this 40,000 crore, roughly $5 billion transshipment port that you mentioned in a place called Galathia Bay. There is a power plant that is proposed, which of course will be required for this whole thing. There's an airport project, which is now going to be dual purpose, military and civil. Earlier it wasn't. When the proposal was first put out, it was just a civil project. And then there is a huge 130 square kilometer township project, which includes a greenfield township, tourism project, and things like that, which is on pristine tropical evergreen forest. So initial estimates said maybe 1 million trees will be cut in this 130 square kilometers. That number is an underestimate, could be 3 million, could be 10 million. So we are talking of 20% of a land under which will be kind of given away for the project, and the multiple components, and there are the multiple feared impacts, including on the biodiversity, on the coastal ecosystem, on the forest ecosystem, and like I mentioned in the beginning, on the indigenous people.
No, are you saying 137 square kilometers, you said?
Yes.
So are you saying that this township, as you think or as it has been imagined, is not to run the other projects there, say, for example, the airport or the container terminal, but a township of its own with people living there out from the mainland and for tourism purposes? So
Yeah,
what
so
is this township?
130 square kilometers is a very large area, and it obviously is meant, it cannot be just for a set of people who are going to run infrastructure. So it is proposed as a township. If you look at the proposal details, you have all kinds of facilities that are being proposed over there, and they say people, rich people can come and get these lands, and how. So it's proposed as a township, uh, which which will also service these other infrastructure projects that are being made. And That's what the 3.5 lakh people are. You don't require 3.5 lakh people to run the infrastructure that we're talking about. So it will of course contribute to that infrastructure running, but the idea is that this will be developed as a greenfield township and a tourism project, and all the facilities will be created for that. So they want to add a cruise terminal so that international tourists can come. The airport will bring in tourists, other facilities. So you're right, it's not just to run the infrastructure that's been created, it's a township of its own. It's a greenfield new township that is seeking to be created.
So there will be clearly resorts, and people will buy land there and move in and
Yes, yes.
create. So it is being opened up to the rest of the country, and I presume to the elite of the country.
That I think would be what the consequence of that would be as it is planned. Yes,
No, I mean,
it is going to be opened up.
I can't imagine lots of middle class people moving there and saying,
Sure,
"Let's set up
absolutely.
homes there."
Also,
Uh,
because yeah, no, and I also just when you say open up, I mean that's a good point, and I just like to say that see the entire island, about 90%, 95% of this island is legally what is known as a tribal reserve under a local regulation. A large, again, 95% of this island is a reserve forest under the Indian Forest Act. Now, what we have seen in the last 3-4 years is a process where these lands are being denotified. It is being de-reserved. The forest land is being de-reserved. The tribal reserve is being denotified because unless these legal changes are made, that land does not become available for use in a different kind of way. So it's very clearly making that land available through this process for all kinds of things, including what we have just discussed.
and there's no real estimate of the number of trees that will be cut. Is that you? I read some article in which you mentioned that the number of trees that will be cut is, large. But I think you implied, or maybe I read it in a different way, that you said that there is no number that is being set about how many trees will go.
So the thing is that in the initial document, the proposal spoke about 8.6 lakh trees to be cut. This was upgraded a little later in a statement made in Parliament by the Environment Minister, something like 9.6 lakh trees. That's about 1 million trees. More recently, ecologists and scientists have done some quick assessments of what is the density of trees in a tropical forest of this kind, and their estimates suggest uh, at least the number of trees will be at least 3 times more than this number of 1 million. It could actually be up to 10 million trees. So we have some numbers, but what we are now getting to know is that these are underestimates by a factor of 3, maybe a factor of 10. So much larger number of trees are thought to be cut and thought to be lost. And interestingly, more recently there was a call for expression of interest by the project proponent, in which one of the things that is asked for is an agency to also enumerate the trees, cut the trees, and dispose the trees. So what it also suggests is while the environment and the forest clearances have been got, the project proponents still actually do not know how many trees are going to be lost. Otherwise, they would not call for an expression of interest by a contractor or a tender for somebody who will actually also do the enumeration of the trees on this island and the project area. So we are
One
talking
of
about a
the
very large number of trees.
one of the other articles, one of the articles on this, when you wrote in the front line, I think, in which you have said that you're not sure that there is expertise to cut these trees, because I think you mentioned the case of the Andamans, and you said that this tree cutting will go on for the next 20 odd years. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah, so what I was saying in this article is that if you look at the history of logging in the Andaman Islands, which had a commercial operation for a very long time, and if you so cutting down a tree, perhaps with coming in of technology, it might be easier, but from my understanding, it is not a very easy task to cut down these massive rainforest trees and evacuate them and open up the forest for use of other development. Because even if you cut down a whole forest, it does not simply easily become immediately available for development and for building up your tourism or all that. That land has to be cleared. There are huge tree stumps. So I have seen parts of the Andaman forest. This is talking of many years ago, because logging has cut down substantially in the recent years. Once the forest is cut, they burn down that patch of forest. because otherwise you can't use that patch of land even for agriculture, and even then the tree stumps are still standing there. So I am extrapolating to suggest that it is not going to be easy, and with all the equipment, all the history and the mandate for cutting and the expertise, they were only able to cut a certain amount of timber for commercial use. So if one just goes by that number, then it does not seem likely that such a large area of forest with so many trees can be cut down in time for even the implementation of the project. Now, these are based on certain figures, and of course, how it will play out, we don't know. But to me, it does not seem it's going to be so easy, because even the infrastructure for cutting these trees, for moving them out of the forest, from transporting them away from the islands, is going to be a huge task. And Nicobar has never seen forest cutting like it has been in the Andamans. The Nicobar Islands have never seen commercial forestry. In the Andaman Islands, commercial forestry is a 120-year-old operation, starting with the British. So they had expertise, they had equipment, they had elephants. There was a huge force of elephants that was working in the forests. That's not there in the Nicobar. So, are they going to get elephants? Are they going to move JCBs? I don't know what they're going to do, but that's not going to be easy. That's the point I was trying to make in that article.
You've obviously been going there a lot, and you know them intimately. Would you describe to us, as much as you can, what a dense forest in the Nicobar Island, Great Nicobar Island, looks like?
It's difficult to kind of explain that way, but I think looking at pictures, of which people are listening in, they can check. There are pictures. It's lush green, uh, uh, tremendously. I can only the canopy closes up in a tropical rainforest. You have a very rich undergrowth, a diversity of animal and plant life in that forest, unique species of plants, and along with that, unique species of fauna that you're finding there. Uh, the coastline is also actually very rich. We've only been talking forests, but the beaches over here, uh, different coastal ecosystems, and beaches, of course, something I also want to mention. We have in Great Nicobar and in the Andaman Islands, turtle nesting beaches, beaches for the nesting of sea turtles, which are among the most important anywhere in the world for certain species which are there in Great Nicobar, and which will be directly impacted by some components of the project, because they are going to come up exactly on the nesting sites of these particular creatures. So a tropical rainforest is something to be experienced. I mean, let me put it that way. Uh, it is full of life. It is thriving. It is vibrant. It has aspects that still need to be studied and to be discovered, and it's very, very unique, considering uh, it's just the forest of its kind and there's nothing else. We have so many creatures in these forests that are not found even in the Andaman Islands, leave alone rest of the planet or any other part of the world. So just creatures found in 2 islands or 3 islands or 6 islands, small and big creatures. Some of them probably have not even been discovered or studied. So there's much to that forest that we need to value.
Have scientists gone and studied the flora and fauna of the Great Nicobar? Is
Well,
there
there
is
are
there
studies.
is there studies, research, literature?
There is certain amount of literature. It has been an area of research, but and I'm since I'm not a biologist or an ecologist, I'm not best placed to answer that question. But I think it's quite clear that there's a lot more that can be done, a lot more that can be studied, right from across life forms. Uh, this is particularly Great Nicobar is a forest that has not been studied to the extent that say some of the other islands have been, and there are inventories. We know roughly what the plant species are, what the animal species are. So we do have a decent sense, which is why I'm also able to talk about the fact that there are creatures that are only found here and not anywhere else. There's some documentation, which is also raises the concern of what will happen to these creatures, because we know that they exist, and we know that they are rare. We know that their distribution is restricted. So yes, there is knowledge, there is information, but there's also the concern that we don't know enough, and the case of the unknown, and the fear that the destruction of these forests or a part of this forest will lead to the destruction of creatures that we've not even studied or understood or even recorded. So there is that precaution that one kind of is responding to, and one wonders whether it's worth losing all of that for what is proposed.
Pankaj, your book, latest book, which you have edited, is called The Great Nicobar Betrayal. Oh, that's an interesting title. Why do you call it betrayal? Was there something promised that the establishment is going back upon, or how do you call? How do you describe this betrayal?
Yeah, I know. I think that's a very good question, and it's a damn good question. And we've had a little struggle even in actually getting the title for the book when we were publishing it. But I'll narrate a few things, Siddharth, which of the details of the project. So when I'm saying the betrayal, what I'm saying is that you're right in the sense of what was promised, or what is the mandate of our institutional structures, of our polity. What have we promised Great Nicobar? So, for instance, uh, you have uh, the project proponent. Let me give you three different examples. The project proponent is a quasi-government organization based in Port Blair called ANIDCO, which is the Andaman and Nicobar Island Industries Development Corporation, or something of the exact. That's roughly what it is. Now they are going to be implementing the 70,000 crore project, which is the infrastructure project, in one of the world's most difficult geologies. We've not discussed this. This area is one of the most tectonically active zones on the world map. You know, the earthquake of December 2004 that caused the tsunami is only about 100 nautical miles from where this project is coming up. And maybe we can discuss that a little later, and that's also part of the betrayal and the concern. But I'll come to that as the fourth point, perhaps. So ANIDCO is going to implement this 70,000, or now it's an 80,000 crore project. One would imagine that they have a history and experience of doing that. Now, in this very unique island of these indigenous communities, you're implementing this project. This project proponent implementing a 70,000 crore project, their annual turnover for the last 30 years has been 300 crores. Their annual profit is 50 crores. Their main business since they have been created, they're based in Port Blair, is to sell milk, is to run some tourism operation, is to sell petroleum, and is to sell liquor. Now, how are we in a position to trust this organization to be able to implement a project of this kind? Are we not putting that entire island and the entire infrastructure that will be created to risk? And what allows us to do that? So that's point number one example. The second example, I was talking about the tribal communities, and I also mentioned that a large part of this island is a tribal reserve. And there is a local tribal welfare department of the Andaman administration, which presumably is meant for the welfare and the well-being of the tribal community. And the primary legal framework for the protection is the protection of the lands of these people, because the Shompen and the Nicobari and the other communities are dependent as tribal communities on the resources of the land. So that forest and that land is absolutely crucial for their survival. Now there is, in 2021, if I remember right, there is a letter by the Andaman and Nicobar Tribal Welfare Department to the project proponent saying that for the project, if you want the land of the tribals, we will help you and we will facilitate the denotification and the availability of this land for the project. So this is a classic case of the fence eating up the crop. So an agency that is meant for is mandated with the welfare and the protection of the community, it's itself offering the project proponent the land which is under, in some senses, under their watch and under their care. That's second example. Third one, you know, this I mentioned the the turtles. So where the port is going to come up is a place called Galathea Bay, and this is the centerpiece of the project. It's a 35,000 crore transshipment port. Now, there is a beautiful beach in this bay where a turtle known as a giant leatherback turtle comes to nest. Now, the giant leatherback turtle is the largest of the world's sea turtles. It can grow up to 6 feet in length and 600 kilograms in weight. And Galathea Bay and the Great Nicobar Island, it has been recorded, and now there's evidence that this is one of the most important nesting sites of this turtle in the entire northern Indian Ocean. The giant leatherback also is a creature that has been on this planet since the time of the dinosaurs. Now, Galathea Bay was declared a wildlife sanctuary in 1997, the beach and a 12-kilometer part of the bay, precisely because this beach is very important for turtle nesting. So in 1997, a sanctuary was created for these turtles. In 2021, even before the project proposal comes into the public domain, the Ministry of Environment and Forest has gone ahead in a meeting and denotified this wildlife sanctuary, because otherwise the port project cannot come up over there. By legally, you would not be able to make a port here if it's a wildlife sanctuary. So the Ministry of Wildlife, Environment and Forests, the National Board for Wildlife, which has been mandated by the people and the government of this country for the protection of biodiversity, have gone ahead in a meeting and denotified the sanctuary, not because it has lost its ecological value or is not important anymore. As a matter of fact, latest evidence says that there are a larger number of turtles nesting there than in the past few years. There's at least a fifth. The latest figures of the Forest Department of last month got to an RTI suggests that the numbers are actually increasing. So this is what I'm trying to say. When there is the agencies that are mandated to protect are actually signing away these resources for a commercial project, not sticking to the mandate that they are supposed to actually fulfill. And for a community that is 250 people, a PVTG, a community with special constitutional guarantees, a creature which is one of the most unique creatures on this planet. And interestingly, the leatherbacks that nest in the Andaman and Nicobar, Sidharth, they have been recorded swimming as far as Australia and the African coast after nesting on the beaches over here. And this beach will be lost. This is one of the most important nesting sites in the entire northern Indian Ocean. It is being signed away by the ministry that is meant to protect it. So, there's example after example after example of this. So that's why if one looks at the scale of the whole thing, if one looks at the EIA report, it is shocking, the lack of rigor, the apathy with which they have gone about doing the EIA. One could go into details and details. There's a proposal in the project, and that's my last point, to separate the settler and the tribal community by putting barbed wire fences. Which world are we? Which time are we living in? So when we look at all these details, then one just realizes, why are we doing this, and what is going to be lost for what? That's the question, and that's why I just increasingly feel more and more that it's as big a betrayal as one can think of. There's also the geological point, but maybe if you have a question, or I can come to that, and that's another very important and crucial point.
No, I mean, the point is well taken that in all, if you look at the thing, uh, it's it's a kind of ecosystem that includes the geology, which should be protected, and there are institutions to protect it, and those institutions have been, in a manner of speaking, swept aside. Those laws, those regulations have been swept aside in this. So in this frenzy. So, do you think that one way or the other, considering that so many agencies have fallen into place and signed off, and do you think one way or the other the government seems to be determined to go ahead with this project?
That certainly is the case, but I do feel that there are many of these things will have to be considered. And I do feel compelled to make that point on the geology, because it's also a question that I find very surprising has not been considered to the extent it should be, because what it is going to put at stake is actually the investment. I mean, leave alone the tribal rights, leave alone the biodiversity. Siddharth, when the earthquake of 2004 happened, this part of the islands, Nicobar and Great Nicobar, saw a permanent subsidence of 15 feet. The island of Nicobar sank by 15 feet permanently. So if you look at a picture of the southernmost tip of India, the point called Indira Point, there's a very famous lighthouse standing there. Now, the
Yes.
lighthouse of Indira Point stands surrounded by the water of the Andaman Sea today. And actually, there's an illustration on the cover of the book you mentioned, The Great Nicobar Betrayal. You can see on the right-hand side this lighthouse standing in water. This lighthouse was not standing in water before 2004. It stood far above the high tide line. It stood surrounded by the forest of the Nicobar Island. This island sank 15 feet, which is why this lighthouse stands in water. These islands experience an earthquake of 4 to 5 on the Richter scale on an average every week. This is the scale of the tectonic activity. And imagine constructing a port, and imagine you putting that investment there, and there is going to be another earthquake, which it is going to come. There might be another displacement, because these displacements are common in these islands. It's not like a first time event that happened. Imagine a displacement, either uplift or subsidence. What will happen to a port project? What will happen to the investment that's made? What will happen to the people who are brought there? What will happen to uh, all all that has been created over there? And if you look at the documents that have been submitted, including one by WAPCOS, which is a consulting agency, which says uh, that this is a good landscape where even the tsunami of 2004 did not have an impact. You have seen 15 feet of submergence, and you are not seeing that as impact. So uh, if we start to consider all of this, if we start to actually factor the risk that is there and the cost implications that will happen because of that, and there's of course the question of what is going to be the economics of the whole thing. And again, in the frontline issue that you mentioned, Raj Shekhar, who writes also for Wire, has done a very, very detailed and a very critical analysis from the economic perspective of what really is this project and where is the economic viability of it. So, to answer your question, yes, the government seems determined. But I think if we start to unpack it and look at all these dimensions, the ethical dimension, the ecological dimension, the issue of rights, the economic viability, the tectonic activity, I think it only makes sense that we have to reconsider it. And we are hoping that there will be, because the evidence that is building up, the concern that is coming is substantial, it's slowly increasing. And I'm hopeful that the authorities and the government will consider. But yes, at the moment, they seem to be going ahead full steam.
Tell me, I mean, you have you are an activist, you've got people who think similarly, have various, like this association of primatologists, have other groups also started coming together to say that this is a very bad idea? Is there some kind of a this emerging um, larger voice?
So actually, to be honest, I think from the scientific community, not as much as one is hoping. Very early on, a group of turtle researchers had sent a letter expressing the kind of concern that I have been talking about today. After that, we've not actually heard much. There have been occasional scientists and researchers who have been talking. I mean, people contributing in the Great Nicobar betrayal. Some of them are researchers, they're scientists. There's a very nice essay in the frontline issue by two ecologists, Shankar Raman and Rohan Atha, who work with the Nature Conservation Foundation. They write a very beautiful essay on forests and on corals, both from a scientific perspective and a philosophical perspective. But as a body, I think the one that you mentioned, the AIP, is the first substantial voice that is there. But there have been other bodies, other groups of people that have been responding. One of the early ones was the Constitution Conduct Group, which, as you perhaps know, is a collection of former
Yes.
very senior bureaucrats and very distinguished senior researchers and bureaucrats, and they have been quite vocal. They have written at different points of time about this project to the President of India, to the relevant national councils for scheduled tribes, the ministries and all that. They have been quite vocal, they have been quite articulate, and that has actually mattered because uh, some of those voices have been at least listened to. They've gotten media, but there has been some mobilization, as in many cases, through youth groups, through social media. One always is hoping for more because it's a large project and many people are struggling with many things. But yes, there is a concern. We have just done a Bengali translation of this book, The Great Nicobar Betrayal, which was done completely by a group of academics and researchers in Kolkata. We had done an event a few months ago. They got interested. They'd taken up the initiative. It was released just 2 days ago. So clearly there is an interest. There is a concern. The concerns are spreading slowly through the media, through initiatives like this. So hopefully there will be more people who will realize uh, the kind of scale that is. There's also a sense that people are concerned but don't feel empowered enough to speak about it. I think which is also there across issues in this country today. So I think that is also there. Certainly, many people in private conversations are expressing concern, but institutions otherwise feel incapable or not able to do that. But hopefully, they will muster courage. And but also there is a need. That the point is that a good amount of research can still be done to understand and unpack what's happening uh, from ecological perspective. Yeah, yes, Siddharth.
So my last question is, I remember in the 80s there was the Silent Valley project, which you
Yes.
must have definitely read about. and the Silent Valley was to cut down a lot of trees in a pristine area in Kerala to
Yes.
set up a power plant, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
a power project. And since then, you mentioned these institutions that have been created for protection of in Nicobar, the Great Nicobar and the Nicobar group of islands in general. There have been institutions. There have been
Yes.
many other, and Mrs. Gandhi at the Silent Valley backed off. She met delegations from there and all that. Have you at least come across any has there been any receptiveness on the part of this government to meet you, to listen to your concerns, to address them?
Not really, not really. So there has been no. Actually, I mean the answer is in some senses quite straightforward. No, there has been some. I mean, political opposition with the Congress and other parties, and there have been some discussions in Parliament. But if you look at the response of the government so far, is that they are constantly saying that no, we've taken care, the process have been followed, due process has been followed, the clearances have been granted, we will take care of everything, there will not be a damage, there will not be the concerns that are being raised, we will address them. So to that extent, of course, they have to hear and respond, but beyond that, no, there hasn't been almost any response from the government to the concerns that have been raised.
What's your biggest concern? What's your biggest feeling of optimism about this?
So I think the fact that slowly there's a growing interest in this and a growing articulation of the concerns. When we started to first write, when I started to first write about this early 2021, uh, the Hindu group was the Hindu newspaper was very supportive. They carried a number of stories. After that, a number of media houses, including the Wire, uh, legacy media, online media, has taken it up. Frontline has been they've done two special issues on that. We have this Bengali translation come out. I've been speaking in a number of places. So I think the spread of the word, the fact that there are people now getting to know about it, certainly more than it should be, and the fact that people are concerned, people respond to the concern that we are raising, is, I think, certainly very positive. And the fact that there have been constant efforts, and people have tried across even different projects, people are trying to do what they do. So the fact that people are responding to also a lot of private conversations, like I mentioned, with people in the forest department, with people in the research community saying that we agree with the concerns, we don't want this project, but at the moment we are not able to do something about it. So the hope is there might be a moment when these voices will be more vocal, they will be more bold, and I think we will see the value of the concern that we are raising, because losing this place, because it will be lost for something that we are not going to gain much, I think is not going to be worth it. So my positive aspect is that there is this uh, growing awareness and growing recognition of the concerns. And yes, there is also some intervention in the courts. So there are 2 or 3 matters now in the Calcutta High Court on exactly this, on the violation of the tribal rights and on some of the ecological issues. So yes, and the fact that there are people willing to go to court, they're willing to stand up and articulate their concerns. I mean, this is the best we have in the system that we have. We reach out to the authorities, we reach out to the public, the media is there, and I think that's happening. And I think one step at a time, hopefully we will cover the distance and cover it soon.
And you really want it to be completely stopped?
There doesn't, in my reading, Siddharth, of the project of these islands, there does not seem to be any benefit at all. Implementing this project is not going to be easy. Uh, it's one little island, 900 square kilometers, far away from the mainland. It's unique as you can imagine. Why would we want to lose it? And one really has to do that cost benefit, and you will see. And like Rajshekhar has done in the frontline issue in many ways, and like other people have been talking, it's not really going to bring any benefit at all. And we've not discussed certain other aspects, but from whatever angle you look at it, it does not seem to offer anything at all. Actually, I mean that's my perspective, of course.
Yes, well, I prefer to, at the moment, look at your general optimism as, these things take time, as you know.
Absolutely.
Uh, and what you saw in 2021, if there are more people seeing it, perhaps there might be some kind of uh, rethink on this whole thing. So one can only, as somebody who would want something like this protected as part of the country, one can only hope that better sense prevails. So thank you very much, Pankaj, for joining me and explaining it so succinctly. I'm sure people who listen to this will also perhaps, no, not perhaps, definitely think to themselves, I didn't know this was happening. So thanks for joining me and explaining it. And all the best to your efforts. That is Pankaj Sekhsaria, activist who has really, really tried his best to bring the fact that a great resource of this country is going to be lost. We'll be back again next week with another guest. Till then, from me, Sidharth Bhatia, and the rest of the Wire Talks team, goodbye.